Welcome back. We are on the third loop of the third arc, and we are done being insane. It's time for revenge. Or, attempted revenge, I guess. Subaru just came back after dying, so let's go ahead and try to figure out the timeline while we can. Alright, I'm not about to try to guess the pre reset days just yet. It's at least 3 days, but there could be more or fucking less. I don't know. I'm gonna start mapping the loops. We got two loops so far. Day one will be the reset point. It happens sometime midday, I think. Well, probably around noon, but I'm not sure. So the only real point that we have in common is the pain that Rim feels. In the first loop, they leave the capital after the signal, probably the same day. In the second, they leave in the afternoon before the signal. In the first loop, Subaru takes a few days to get back to the mansion before he dies. In the second, he takes a day-ish in the cave before getting back. This is honestly about all we have at this point. I can make a few guesses on the days, but I think I'll wait. I know we get some more info, so I'll just fill in the blanks as we go. Yeah, it's not perfect, but we're making some headway. I'm hoping by the end of this arc I'll have this all lined up. Subaru opens his eyes in front of the Apple Store. He takes Rim's hand as they leave. This time his mind is more clear, and he is determined to stop Betelgeuse. He will kill him with his own hands. Welcome to the Rage Loop. He is out for blood, and his actions are going to show it. And I am not even going to pretend like this is going to work out well for him. When they get back to the mansion, they are greeted by Wilhelm. A dragon carriage waits by the front, meaning that a guest is inside talking with Cruchet. Before long, a man steps out from the mansion and joins the conversation. He introduces himself as Russell Fellow. He seems to know Subaru's name already, saying he's heard from others that he is Amelia's knight, but he doesn't give out much more information. Subaru feels like he's in a battle of wits somehow, so it's hard to like the guy. With his business concluded, Russell gets into his carriage and leaves. Wilhelm says that Russell is the treasurer of the Merchants Guild, an ordinary merchant for most people, but extremely shrewd and probably knows more than he's letting on. Subaru decides not to think too much about it and moves on. Now that there are no more guests for the day, Subaru requests a meeting with Cruchet. Russell will become important later, kind of. Subaru and Wilhelm talk a little bit more in the light novel. Wilhelm notices his change in demeanor. He sees the bloodlust in his eyes. He's confused. The Subaru is acting completely different than what he was when he left earlier. But he actually says he prefers this side of Subaru, so... The three go inside to join Cruchet and Felix. The negotiations begin. The witch cult will attack Roswell's domain in 3 days. Subaru needs help in dealing with them. Thank God we have some kind of clue to the timeline here. So the ordeal, the attack on the mansion and the village, is going to take place 3 days from the reset point. So now we know. Cruchet isn't really surprised. Given the fact that Amelia is now publicly known, it was almost guaranteed that they would do something eventually. But Roswell himself should be enough to handle them. Why should Cruchet step in? Subaru explains that they will attack multiple areas, and Roswell can't be at multiple places at once, so their help is still needed. Cruchet doesn't push back on this reasoning, but is that it? It's not much of a negotiation if all Subaru is going to do is state that an attack is going to happen. Cruchet wants to know why he's coming to her and what she'll get from helping him. Since she has been friendly to them so far, Subaru thinks that she will be easier to convince. But that is thrown out almost immediately. Cruchet is only helping them because of the deal she made with Amelia. She won't be convinced unless there's a good enough reason. With nothing to really offer, Subaru tries to leave it vague. If you help me out with this problem, then I'll owe your camp a huge debt. Should I accept the proposal, it would mean Amelia's withdrawal from the royal selection. You understand that. If Amelia can't defend her own domain, then she isn't fit to become ruler. It was apparent he hadn't fully thought through what he was doing. If he was here negotiating for Amelia's camp, then the stakes were high. But it didn't matter. Subaru still wants their help. Alive is better than dead, even if it meant dropping out of the race. Hearing this, Crochet comes to a decision and refuses to help him. It's pretty simple. If the witch cult attacks and kills Amelia, then that's one rival eliminated, and she doesn't get any of the backlash for it. It's in her best interest to not help. Subaru sees helping as good in and of itself, but Crochet thinks that the ruler should be the one to do something. In this case, it's Roswaal and Amelia who are failing, not her. She has no obligation to help. And it's not like she's being heartless here. She understands her position. If she goes and fights the witch cult and saves Roswaal's domain, but loses a big part of her army, then her camp and her people will suffer. She is thinking about helping the people that are relying on her. At least I think that's what she's thinking. It could be wrong, obviously, but that would match her personality. But there are some other issues that stop her from helping. Crochet questions how he knows about the attack, and naturally Subaru can't answer. The witch cult has been around for a long time without anyone being able to predict where they will turn up next. The only way Subaru would be able to predict the attack is if he was in the cult. This is how it looks from Crochet's perspective, and Subaru can't clear up that misunderstanding. But she does believe that he is telling the truth, or more precisely, that he believes he is telling the truth. Her divine blessing lets her read the wind, and she knows when people are lying to her. This isn't like a fact checker or anything, but she can tell that Subaru believes that there's going to be an attack and that he is not in the witch cult. And this, pretty much, she concludes that he has gone mad. Crochet ends up asking Rem if she has noticed anything suspicious about Subaru, and of course she doesn't mention the witch scent whatsoever. I'm really curious about what she was thinking in this moment. Neither version really say anything about it, but at this point she's pretty devoted to Subaru, so it's probably nothing. We'll never know regardless, so whatever. The negotiations are breaking down. Subaru is desperate. He gets on his hands and knees, begging Crochet to help. The witch cult needs to die. All of them. Kill them all. That will solve everything. Crochet seems to understand now. All of his actions make sense. Your hatred of the witch cult, is that the reason you approached Amelia? From the outside looking in, this makes a lot of sense. Once Amelia's identity becomes public, there's a good chance the cult will attack. They're damn near impossible to track normally, but joining her camp just kind of turns it into a waiting game. Subaru doesn't deny his hatred, but says that what he wants is to save people. I am certain I've told you, Subaru, that if your own lies don't fool you, it will not deceive others. You haven't once said that you wanted to save Amelia. Subaru bites his own lip so hard that it bleeds. The witch cult needs to die. That will save everyone. And he won't get any help here. As he goes to leave, he says, I hope you become a great ruler, a kind of dictator that abandons the weak. The two versions are pretty much the same. Subaru tries the morality line, you should save people no matter what, a few more times in the light novel, but it doesn't really change anything. There is one thing that's different. In both versions, Subaru tries to step around the table like he's about to step up to Crochet, and then he is stopped by Wilhelm. In the light novel, he's holding a spoon like he's about to stab somebody, and it's really not helping his case of not being a madman. Honestly, I'm really surprised they didn't do anything to him here. She just questioned whether he was in the witch cult, and then he tries to walk up on her with bloodlust in his eyes while holding something to stab her with, and I guess they just don't see Subaru as a threat, which, I guess that makes sense. Subaru is very much in denial about his thoughts right now. He does want to save people, but he is far more concerned with killing the witch cult, and everybody sees it. Subaru and Rem go over their options. Roswaal is away from the mansion for a few days, which is why he was never there. In the anime, Rem just says that he's off visiting people. In the light novel, she specifically mentions Garfield. And so the novels are already introducing stuff for the next arc. Subaru wants to ask Reinhardt for help, but he's already left the capital. In the anime, Rem says that yesterday Reinhardt told him that he was leaving, which I guess implies that was the day that he came to visit them at Cruchet's, but that also could have been different days. I'm not really sure. In the light novel, Subaru goes to Reinhardt's place to try to find him, and he talks to the servants, and they tell him that Reinhardt left 2 days ago. Honestly, it probably doesn't matter. We know that Reinhardt left before the reset point, and that's enough. It's impossible for Subaru to rely on Reinhardt here, so he'll have to find a different solution. And this ends up showing Subaru's mindset right now. He sees Roswaal and Reinhardt as useless, since they're not helping him. I mean, they can't help him right now, but that doesn't matter to Subaru. He starts to see almost everybody as useless, like they're trying to get in his way, which probably isn't helping when you're trying to convince people to help you. Subaru is low on options. With Roswaal being gone, he needs to find help elsewhere before they go back. Cruchet and Reinhardt are out. Julius is out of the question. And this pretty much leaves him with one more person to ask. The next morning, Subaru goes to talk to Priscilla. While pleading his case, she starts to laugh and cuts him off. Going around informing the opposition of your own size weakness serves only your enemy's interest. For us, seeing you lower your head and say, "We're too weak and desperate, please help us," is a matter of celebration. She knocks him over and gives him a choice. Lick my foot and I'll consider your proposal. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you'd rather favor your minuscule pride and abandon the mistress you wagged your tail for to the wastelands, fine. Either choice you make will entertain me. Subaru gives in and starts to put his face close to her foot. Her face sours and she kicks him in the face. His nose spews blood and it might be broken. What you've just displayed is neither loyalty nor devotion. Even if the witch cult is defeated, I will strike down any camp you are a part of. Your careless behavior and attitude have led me to that decision. She picks him up and throws him across the room into the door. Al opens the door and takes Subaru outside. Priscilla gets a lot of hate here for how she acts, and I completely agree. I'm going to go over what she is thinking, but I'm going to admit that I am just guessing. It sounds like what she wants is for Subaru to give up his pride and to lick her foot, and she will maybe help him. But what she actually wants is the opposite. She wants him to stand up and show some strength. As soon as Subaru, goes to actually lick her foot, she sees him as weak. She sees the same thing that everyone else sees during this loop. She says that he has the greed of a pig, that he is just taking without giving anything back, that he'll roll around in the mud and consume anything given to him, even at the cost of the person trying to help him. Cruchet says that there's nothing in it for her, which is kind of along the same lines. Priscilla is just a little more upfront about it. She sees him as a parasite, only taking for his own gain. That's why she's angry and disgusted with him. And at least I think that's what she's thinking. I'm not 100% sure, but it matches with everything else this loop. Alright, let's talk about some differences. In the light novel, Rem goes with Subaru. And the anime cut this out, which means they cut out Schultz's only real appearance in this arc. But there's really not much to it. He basically just escorts Rem to the waiting room while Subaru goes and talks to Priscilla. More importantly, this cuts out a very interesting interaction between Rem and Al. On the way out, Al calls her Ram. When she corrects him, he starts to ask questions. So you're sisters. So she's alive. And at that point, he gets super pissed and just lets off like a dangerous aura that makes it seem like he's about to attack. He's more lost in thought during this time, and he calms down after a minute or two, and they go back to normal. Subaru and Rem leave, and Al says, "You gotta be kidding me. So that's what it was? It makes me want to puke." So to help clear this up, he thought that she was Ram, and he was confused that they were sisters and that they were both alive. Supposedly, he met Ram, back when on the first day that Subaru got there, and he wasn't a dick to her then. And he was perfectly fine with Rem being Ram when he just got her mixed up. He wasn't angry until he found out that they were both alive. Now, this hasn't been cleared up at all. We have no fucking idea why he got so upset. But this and a few other things have kind of fed into the idea that Al is Subaru. That maybe it's Subaru from the future, or maybe a completely different timeline, or maybe a failed replica. There's lots of different ideas, but they all kind of hover around the same idea that it's just Subaru. And this theory is not out of the question. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but there are lots of connections that are a little too weird. He was isekai'd into this world. He has a power very similar to Subaru's, and he said on multiple occasions that he has bad memories of failing a silver-haired girl. There's also times when he seems to suffer from memory loss or maybe false memories. I mean, take this for an example here. He has met Ram before in a side story, and he knew her name before she even said it. But then he doesn't understand that Rem was a different person whenever he met her here, and he gets angry that they're both alive. It's very similar to what happens with Subaru when he's a few loops in and something happens a little differently than expected. He gets confused and doesn't understand what's going on. There is a few other things, but again, I'm not trying to go over all the details on this right now. So the theory does have some good evidence. At the very least, Al knows some shit that it's very important to the overall story, but we will probably not get that info for a very long time. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the theory. I'm more in the camp of just letting people be themselves. Al is just Al. Amelia is just Amelia. Subaru goes to get a dragon carriage while Rem is talking to the royal guard. He ends up bumping into Anastasia and Mimi at the market. Subaru thinks of Julius. He doesn't know much about Anastasia, but if Julius is her knight, then he doesn't really want to be around her. He tries to end the conversation quickly, saying he needs to get a dragon carriage, but she informs him that getting a dragon carriage may not be possible. Someone has been buying all of them. She is willing to help, but only if Subaru will have a conversation with her. They stop at a restaurant where he was planning on meeting Rem, and they enjoy a small meal. Subaru wants to cut to the chase. Anastasia writes down a place and signs her name. If he goes there with her signature, he should be able to get a dragon carriage. But she doesn't give it to him immediately. Instead, she wants to talk for a bit longer. Subaru doesn't understand why she wants to talk to him, and she says, "I believe there's nothing in this world that has no meaning." She speaks in a Kansai dialect, which is more casual than traditional Japanese. There's probably more differences, but that's the big one that I found. And I am not an expert, so you should probably not take my word for it. Anastasia explains that Mimi is actually second in command of her personal mercenary group, the Iron Fang. Seeing her demeanor, Subaru is skeptical, but he also doesn't have a reason to care too much. Anastasia moves the conversation over to the economy. The iron and weapons are being bought up, and says Cruchet is the one behind it. Subaru says that explains why Cruchet has so many visitors, such as Russell. This piques Anastasia's interest. Russell Fellow is a big shot in the merchant world. Anastasia says that this has been informative and hands over the paper. After fighting with Cruchet last night, you just left her place, right? I figured it'd be easy to learn all sorts of information from your mouth, eyes, and expression. The entire conversation has been a setup. Subaru's anger riles up as he realizes what's happened. He's been used once again. If you want people to believe your path is just, you have to show them something concrete that backs up your claim. I don't see that in you, Natsuki. I can't help but value you less for the lack of it. Your worth is decided by what you've done, in other words, your past. No matter what you do, you can't change the past, so the worth of the Natsuki I know hasn't changed one whit. He stands up and gets a staff pointed at his face. I guess Julius's effort went to waste. It's partly my fault, though. As she gets up to leave, she says, "The key to negotiations is how well prepared you are before you come to the table. Know what the other person wants, and dangle it in front of them. And since all you do is want, that's where you're lacking. She claps her hands, and everyone in the restaurant stands up and follows her out. Anastasia gives some really good business advice here. If you're too quick to rush into your own wants, people are going to be less interested in talking business with you. Find out what the other person wants and use that in with the negotiations. It's stuff like that. It's advice that Subaru really needs to fucking listen to. The conversations are pretty much the same in both versions. The anime kind of cuts out a few topics that are important, but not that important. I'm going to talk about them now anyway. Anastasia goes into her motivation a little more. She has a dream to see how far she can go. She wants to keep building her power and building her wealth until she can't anymore. She doesn't know where that limit is, but she wants to keep trying her hardest until she finds that limit. It is greedy, but she wants to see her true worth. Subaru brings up the fact that he is from beyond the Great Waterfall. Anastasia says that some people say that from time to time. So this is the second person to bring it up. This has to be at least somewhat common knowledge. I mean, granted, it's the second candidate, but still, two people have said pretty much the exact same thing. So I think this is kind of common. But she does give him kind of a suggestion. She tells him to read up on Hoshin of the Waste. Also known as Alec Hoshin, the very person Anastasia stole her last name from. Alec Hoshin apparently has said the same thing, that he is from beyond the Great Waterfall. And that's going to make a lot of sense whenever we get to the 5th arc and go to Kararagi. And we'll talk about that more whenever we get there. Subaru is pissed that he has been used and humiliated again. He's done nothing but take L's this entire loop so far. And so I can kind of understand why he's upset, at least a little bit. But honestly, after seeing everything else that's happened to him, I kind of feel like he's taking this one a little too hard. Yeah, she used him to get information, but honestly, it's not anything that's going to hurt him. He gave information on Crochet and Russell. And right now, he doesn't really give two shits about Crochet. I feel like getting a dragon carriage when there's a shortage is well worth the information that he gave, especially when it's not going to come back and bite him. But it's probably more of an issue with pride. Again, he hasn't been doing all that well this loop, and for a minute he thinks that Anastasia might be able to help. And then she turns around and insults him and says that he is worthless. So it's not about the info, it's about the fact that his already low self-esteem was attacked. Rem walks in and reports that the knights will not be helping. They receive countless tips about the witch cult and can't look into them all. Subaru decides they will go on their own. At worst, they will get back and get everyone out of the mansion before the attack. The light novel gives us a little more information on the timeline. Subaru isn't completely sure about the passage of time, but he thinks that they were attacked on the 3rd day, spent a day in the cave, and then they got to the village on the 5th day. Now, I'm not sure how much I trust Subaru's recollection on all this, considering he was pretty much out of it the entire time. Well, I originally planned on making this loop into one video, but then I kept adding details, and I'm trying to avoid hour-long videos, so I guess we're just going to go ahead and hit the pause button here. So I guess Subaru gets to live another day. But that's it for now. See ya.